Hi there, my name is Alberto and I'm currently working on a 3D game which I'm making with my own game engine. Today I wanted to talk about the walls event system that I implemented for my game. This system allows you to create all kind of events or actions that need to happen in your scenes and set them up from the editor in a very easy way. And I believe this is quite extendable to account for all kind of things that you would like to do. So let's dive in. Here I have a tiny scheme of what is the system idea. So it all starts with interactables. There's an interactable system which is uh, quite complex, but I'm not going to enter on details. This interactable system has actions, or what I call interactable actions. These are the actions that will happen when the interactor or the character in this case interact with this interactable with any interactable in the game. So these interactables we set them up in the scene. Yeah, I can just write it here, scene object. So that's mainly where this happens. It's a quite nice software to create things. So these scene objects can be interactables and they will trigger certain actions. If we move further, these actions can directly produce wall events. So it can directly, for instance, move a door or change the lighting environment, whatever you can think about. Any action that must happen after you interact. And also you can think of reverting this action by interacting again. So open the door and close the door. So these are the kind of wall events that you can trigger directly after this. But maybe you also want to have some cutscenes, some more complex events that must happen only once. Like for instance, you want to move the camera somewhere, you want to show display a text, then you want to do something else and then go back to the character. So for that, I also implemented a variable system. This is based on variables, as the name says, which are mainly assets. If you're familiar with Unity, you could also think on scriptable objects here that mainly contain that can be saved and load. And in my case, it's just basically a persisting data that can be saved and be load and can keep track of the state throughout the whole game. So in this system, I have what I call variable setter, which is where the action comes in play. The action will set the state of one of these variables. And then I have other components or other scene objects, which are these variable changers, triggers, which will basically trigger something, an action also, when this variable that they are listening to changes. So in this case, this variable trigger will trigger a cutscene. And a cutscene will produce a lot, bunch of bold events. So that's basically seems a bit complicated, but this is the main idea of the system. So let's dive in the game and see how this would look like. Here we are in the game. Let me show you what I meant with this system. Here I have an example. So I can cheat a bit and move and teleport the player. So the door or this kind of block that you see over here, this is going to go down. Then this enemy here will be disabled. So I will be able to access this kind of switch that is over there. And to produce all these things, I'm gonna interact with this switch over here. So this switch is the interactable. When I get close to it and I press the interactive button, you can see that the camera moved to the door and then moved to the enemy. So it showed me all these events and then it went back to the player. So in these 5 seconds, all these events and interactables actions, the variable setting, the triggers, all this happened to produce this small cutscene. So let's see in the editor, how did I implement it or I set up all this. here we are. This is the editor. So if we go to the switch where everything starts, we can select the switch and we can see that it has different components. So the components that are interesting for us right now is the one called generic interactable and the one called changeable variable. So let's start with the interactable. This is the starting point, right? That's where everything happens. The player triggers this by input, so when it clicks, and it will trigger these two events over here. Which events are these ones? These events here are basically, we are saying that the prototype door that we cannot read properly here. I'm sorry if the UI is not amazing. It's not like in Unity or in Unreal, because this is self-made, so I did what I could. The component is transformable. What it says here, I can click here and you can see I could select a transformable component, and what I'm doing here is to start. So what it does, this event, is basically trigger the door that we saw over there, this one here, to move down. Why? Because this door has this transformable and we are starting this transformable. This transformable, what it does is to translate. I can define any kind of action here. I could say rotate, scale, weight. This is all implemented via code. You can do whatever you want. And then I'm saying that it should go -3 meters down. That's what it's going to do. Let's continue here. If we go back to this one, we see that the next action, the next event, is basically changing the variable. And this is what we said, no, the variable setters. This is the trigger, which is telling me, hey, in the entity switch, so in the same entity, I have this change bool component, and I want you to trigger it to change the bool variable. And here we can see that this bool variable component has a reference to the variable. And here is where it comes what I said. These are the assets. These are all my variables that I define in my game currently. And this is what would be a scriptable object in Unity. You can save, load this easily. And then here I chose my prototype enemy disable. This is the variable I want to change, and I want to set it with this operation set bool operation to true. This is what it's going to do. And if you want to know where I'm creating this, so I have this assets menu, which is not user friendly at all, but is what it is. I have these bool variables, and then I can create them over here. I can also create int variables, and I did not implement more kind of variables because I don't need it. But of course, you can extend that as much as you want. So let's say that we trigger this variable. So what happens then? So we change the variable, no? But we said that there has to be somewhere where we listen to this change and when we trigger this effect, no? And where does this happen? So, well, for that, I have it here separated, and I have some entities inside this variable, which is called enemy trigger. And this is the one which is actually listening to a change of a bool variable. If I go in, you see that this bool variable is the same one. So this says that when this variable becomes equal than this value to true, I want you to trigger all these events. And again, this is generic, right? You can add as many events as you want, and these events, and again, world events, I decide which entity and what I want to do. And here is where it comes a connection between the variable and the cutscene. I actually want to start a cutscene. And for the cutscenes, what I decided to do is to create them as components also. I have them here in cutscenes, and I have 1 and 2. This is the one we are starting, the enemy cutscene. And this can become quite complex. So I made it very simple for here, but the cutscenes for me, I created like a tiny state machine. So you can have phases, you can move between phases, and then each phase can have different actions, and we have to decide how do we move from one action to another. If I open this action here, the transform camera, I'm saying like, hey, I want the camera to move somewhere. I want to move close to this target, and I want to use a certain offset of the camera. So you want to put it in a perspective that you like. And also I'm selecting here that then I want to make the transition to the next one, to number 1. I could add conditions here. I could say, hey, I want you to move to index 1, but only after a certain time, or only after, so you could just create as many as you want. I don't have done many yet. And finally, yeah, what we're doing is just waiting a bit, moving to the next, and waiting a bit, and moving to the next. And that's basically it. That's doing the whole work that you saw there, just with these simple components that I'm setting here. And you can see that it's very extendable. It's mostly extendable also via code. You can set up everything in the editor, which helps a lot if you have coworkers to work with you and set up all these kind of events. But then most of the requests will come to you to say, hey, I need a certain kind of action, no? So you might be wondering, how did I do to disable this enemy? So this was a bit specific. In this case, you can see that what I did is this action here, is to trigger this action, which is called change patroller status interactable action. So I'm selecting the patroller 9. Patrollers are mainly in my game. I have some kind of stealth. You saw the enemies that were moving in a certain etc. They were kind of patrolling, let's say. If you played commandos or kind of game like that, you just basically define what do they have to do, and they repeat the same actions all the time. So I have the patrols here, and what I do is mainly say, hey, patrol 9 is the one which is in place. I want this to look at to the front constantly. This is just doing this. It was constant. So yeah, I made it like this because this is going to be like a watch camera, and it's static, and you really need to disable them, otherwise you cannot cross. So that's basically what it's doing here. It's just looking to the front. And the patroller spawner, this is going to spawn an enemy. And it's set here because I made it in this way. I create the patrols and I spawn an enemy as a child of this patrol. This patrol will look in the child's, will actually look for the spawner, and will say, hey, when this entity is spawned, this enemy is spawned, I will set it as a patroller of me. And then this action, this whole action, what it's doing is selecting which patrol I refer to, and is changing the status of whatever patroller is there, and I'm setting the status as incapable or disabled. So what it's doing for the camera in this case is just you see that the field of view is removed, and it's not going to detect the player, the character, when it moves over there. So that's mainly it. That could be it for the video. I'm not planning to show code here, but if you'd like to know more how these things are implemented via code, please let me know, and I can make a video also more related to coding, and show you the different systems, how are they implemented. It's not a problem for me to share all this information with all of you. So I hope you enjoyed with the video, and please let me know if you would like to see other features of the game, or what kind of content you would like to see.